Hello, and welcome back to another episode of General Conference Conversations, the podcast where we have conversations about General Conference. I'm your host, Kaylin, and I am very excited to be here today. I obviously have not posted in an insanely long time. I did this last year too. For October of 2023 conference, leading up to April of 2024, we moved out to Toronto for work, and same thing happened this last year. We moved back from Toronto because our project out there ended, and it was almost exactly a year on the dot. So it was all the end of the project and then packing up and getting ready to move back home, and now being back home and adjusting back to being here. And then now we're not adjusting for very long because we are going on to another project at the end of February. And so it's just been a little crazy, and I've been busy and tired and just overwhelmed by work and life and all of the things that go into that. And so I have definitely put off jumping into October's conference. And now that it is almost February, which means we only have 2 months. Yeah, that math in my head, 2 months until next general conference. I still want to do this. I've gone back and forth a lot. I really do enjoy it. And I enjoy diving into these, and I enjoy seeing your guys' comments on YouTube and how appreciative you are for my comments. And I really do love, even just for me personally, being able to pull things out of these talks and really enjoy them. And so I am going to continue to do this. This conference, at least, I will not be able to do every single talk. Because I only have 2 months, I would be doing like 4 talks a week, 4 episodes a week, and that just is insane to me. I cannot even fathom doing that. I've done 3 talks a week. I did that last year in January, February, March area because I had to get all of those talks in. And it was a lot. It was just a lot to do 3 episodes a week. I usually do them Sunday afternoons after church. I'll read and record and then edit, and it's just a lot to keep track of. And so the thought of 4 just is crazy to me. So I've gone through and I've picked out some of my favorite talks. I went through my notes from October and picked out the ones that I really loved or had a lot of notes for, had a lot of things to say about. So I've picked, I think it's 12. Hold on. I just did this morning. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yeah, 12 talks. They're pretty well spread out, actually. There's 2 or 3 from every session, so it's not all just one session or just all at the beginning or all at the end. So it's kind of a good mix. And that's my goal. So I'm going to do 2 per week for the next 6 weeks. So I'll finish a little bit before next conference. So I'll have time to prepare for April conference. And my goal, and I had this goal for October as well, so hopefully I can actually stick to this. My goal is to actually start early and post 2 a week between April and October of this year. I will give the caveat, and I'll do this again once April conference is done, that I am, again, we are starting a new project in March. I work in construction, and so we're starting a new project in March, and it ends in October, and so it's like literally going to be exactly during that time. It's the same role that I had at our last project, so at least I am not learning too much. I will have different responsibilities, and it should be a less stressful. Cross my fingers, pray for me. But I will obviously keep you updated if anything changes. But after talking now for 6 minutes, I will jump into what we're actually talking about today, which is Elder Hirst's talk, God's Favorite. And this is from the first session. It's the third talk that was given. And I remember really adoring this talk, and I had a lot of notes about it as well when I was reading through all my notes earlier. I had so many notes about this talk because I just loved it so much. And as you'll see, I usually choose like one or two quotes to really dive into and to tell stories and to ask questions about. And it was really hard to only choose 2 for this particular talk. So I have 2 longer ones that I'm going to deep dive more into. But I'm going to go through a couple of the other ones that I won't necessarily quote them word for word, but everything in this talk was just so good. I was like, I just need to highlight this whole thing. I might as well just read the whole thing on the podcast because it's just amazing. It really is really good. So, this talk is all about God's love. And he talks about how he has 6 kids, and they often tease one another that they're the favorite child. And he, of course, assures that he does not have a favorite. They love them all equally. But every once in a while, when it gets really heated between his kids, he'll say, okay, you wore me down. I'm not going to announce it, but you know which one of you is my favorite. In kind of like a way to say, and he's like, my goal is to each of the 6 feel victorious, and that they all feel that they are my favorite. And so he goes on to talk about how in the Gospel of John, he describes himself as the disciple whom Jesus loved, and Nephi has a similar kind of sense when he writes, I glory in my Jesus. And he's like, well, of course the Savior isn't any more Nephi's than he is John's, and he's no more ours than he is our friends and our families. But they had such personal relationships with Christ that they could feel that was how they described their relationship with him, the disciple whom Jesus loved, and his Jesus, my Jesus. That's one of my favorite verses from the Book of Mormon. Nephi is one of my favorite prophets in the Book of Mormon because he has this such like deep love of Christ, and you can tell he has a very deep personal relationship with him. And that verse, let me read it really quick. I glory in plainness, I glory in truth, I glory in my Jesus, for he hath redeemed my soul from hell. And that's 2 Nephi 33:6. And that, I really love like the way that he starts out with this, right? He's like, there are people, and this is how we feel God's love. It is personal. It is intimate. We just had word conference today in church, and our stake president spoke, and he talked about that. He's like, my two favorite words to describe the atonement are infinite and intimate. Infinite in that it encompasses everybody, it covers everybody, but intimate in that it covers you completely as well. And so I adore that. And so he goes on to talk about how wonderful that is, that we feel so fully and personally noticed that, you know, we feel that close to God. Especially since he is not physically with us. At least I have never seen Christ, right? I have never seen visions. I have not had a personal visitation from the Savior. But even so, he makes me feel so noticed and personally loved. And of course, then he goes on to say, well, is it any surprise that our greatest commandments are to love God and to love our neighbors? And how powerful that is. That as we are loving God and loving our neighbors, there is divinity in that. And he asks a few questions that I am going to read because they're so good. He says, I wish I could sit down with you and ask you what circumstances cause you to feel God's love. Which verses of scripture, which particular acts of service, where would you be, what music, in whose company? General Conference is a rich place to learn about connecting with heaven's love. And I love this. This goes right along with President Nelson's Hear Him initiative, right? We've heard less and less about that in the last few years. It's kind of moved on to other themes, but it has been a big part of President Nelson's time as the prophet is our personal revelation. And that is such a powerful way to feel God's love, is that he's literally speaking to us, right? I mean, how do I feel my husband's love, my mother's love, right? Is when I talk to them, when I speak with them, I spend time with them. And they tell me that, right? They tell me that they love me. And so I loved those questions. They're very reflective. And then of course he then goes, well, but what if you don't? Maybe you don't feel God's love. And he has a few little, these are the couple of little quotes that I just could not read because they're just so powerful. He says, broken, lonely, torn, and bruised he was, and we may feel we are, but separated from the love of God, we are not. Broken people, perfect love, as the song goes. However right you might be about what you know about yourself, you are wrong to think that you have put yourself beyond the reach of God's love. However misshapen we might feel we are, his arms are not shortened. So just to be clear, the idea that God has stopped loving should be so far down the list of possible explanations in life that we don't get to it until after the mountains have left and the hills are gone. And I just love, he has this whole section, it's like 5 or 6 paragraphs of all of this, of like, you might feel that you are not feeling God's love. But like, God still loves you, right? You may just not feel it. And he says that at some point, I can't find it at the moment. I'm like scanning and I can't find it. He says, being loved is not the same as feeling loved. And so God's love is not gone. We just might not be able to feel it because we live in a fallen world, because we are not perfect. So we're not always attuned to that, right? We're not always paying attention to that. There may be things in the world that are keeping us from feeling God's love. And so, of course, he gives some suggestions to be able to feel God's love, to kind of remove those things that are preventing us from feeling God's love. And he has this really beautiful paragraph. It feels poetic to me. I had to read it a couple of times because it has that kind of cadence and like back and forth, and not double negatives, but kind of double negatives of like, wait, what are you saying? And it's just really beautifully written. So hopefully I can give it some justice as I read it to you. He says, I wonder if Jesus were to choose a place where you and he could meet, a private place where you'd be able to have a singular focus on him, might he choose your unique place of personal suffering, the place of your deepest need where no one else can go. Somewhere you feel so lonely that you must truly be all alone, but you aren't quite. A place to which perhaps only he has traveled, but actually has already prepared to meet you there when you arrive. If you are waiting for him to come, might he already be there and within reach. And I found that very touching. I think often we do find Christ and feel God's love in our most trying times. Not to say that's the only time we can find love. Absolutely not. There are very terrible beliefs that people have. Terrible in my opinion, In my opinion, there are beliefs that people have that like that's the only way you can find God is if you're suffering. It's the only way that you can grow is if you're suffering. And we believe that to an extent, right? We believe that through trials and through hard times we grow and we feel God's love. I don't believe that's the case. It's not the only way that we can do that. But when you are in your deepest, darkest place and you feel truly, truly alone, that is oftentimes where I find God, because he's the only person left. Or I feel like he's the only person left. Because he never truly leaves. And through the atonement, Christ has been to our lowest suffering point. He's experienced that. And so, to go along with like this whole talk, but particularly this, where and how do you feel God's love? It's a very simple question, and it may be a very complex answer because it's different for everybody, and it changes as you change. It changes as your life changes. The places and the manners in which I felt God's love on my mission are very different than the ways that I feel God's love now. It's very different moments. It's very different types of love. It's very different ways that he speaks to me. But it's no less powerful and it's no less present. And then right after this paragraph where he talks about feeling God's love in your darkest hour, he says this: if you do feel filled with love in this season of your life, please try and hold on to it as effectively as a sieve holds water. Splash it everywhere you go. One of the miracles of the divine economy is that when we try to share Jesus' love, we find ourselves being filled up in a variation of the principle that whosoever will lose his life for my sake shall find it. And I remember this quote. I remember it very distinctly, and as I was rereading it today, I was like, oh yeah, I totally forgot about this part. But I remember it. I do. I remember hearing it and laughing because it was perfect. It was such a perfect little, like the smallest little analogy that he just throws in there. So if you don't know what a sieve is, if you do, anyway, so a sieve is basically like a strainer, a colander, or specifically the metal ones that are like really fine, little tiny mesh holes, that you strain things through, or you sift like flour through. And so to hear and say, like, if you feel love in the season of your life, try and hold on to it as effectively as a sieve holds water. Splash it everywhere you go. And isn't that a beautiful analogy? Isn't that a beautiful, like, image in your brain, right? Of like, I'm carrying around this sieve, or like even I'm carrying around this bucket and it has holes in it, but I have so much love and I just keep feeling it. I just keep feeling the love. I keep seeking God's love. I keep loving others. I keep getting love from others. They're just so full, and I'm just splashing the water everywhere I go because I can't help it, because my bucket has a hole in it and I want everybody, right? It's such a joyful image to me of like somebody trying to like carry water in this thing that has holes in it and just splashing it everywhere. And you're watering the world. And you're watering the world in love. And I just love that so much. It reminded me of when I was in girls' camp. We had this story, and I know a lot of people use this story, so it's not just like a my girls' camp thing or even just our church thing. The story of the warm fuzzies and the cold pricklies. I don't remember the whole story, so like I don't remember all the details, but basically it was like everybody had these like their pouch of warm fuzzies. And when somebody did something for them or they made them happy, they wanted to make somebody else happy, they would give them a warm fuzzy. And somebody was like, oh, well, if you give all of your warm fuzzies away, you're not going to have any left for yourself. So why are you giving your warm fuzzies away? And so everybody started hoarding them. They wouldn't give warm fuzzies out. And instead they were giving out these cold pricklies because nobody wanted them for themselves, right? So as kind of the opposite, right? So they made them upset or angry. They'd give out a cold prickly. And eventually someone comes around and is like, why aren't you giving out your warm fuzzies? That's what they're meant for. They're meant to give out. And you're giving out these terrible cold pricklies. You know, everybody's miserable. And somebody was like, well, if we give out all of our warm fuzzies, we're not going to have anything left. And the person was like, don't you realize that your warm fuzzies never run out? Like, they literally never run out. And I don't remember all of the details. I should have looked it up. But basically, it was like, your warm fuzzies never run out because you are also getting them. People are giving them to you. And so you are getting warm fuzzies and you're giving warm fuzzies. And so you're just never going to run out of warm fuzzies. And that's what made me think of, like, you're never going to run out of love. And he says that, like, one of the miracles of the divine economy is that when we try to share Jesus' love, we find ourselves being filled up. As we serve, we feel full of God's love. And we, like, as we can, like, there's no shortage, right? There's not, we're not going to run out one day. Like, God's not going to come to us one day and like, oh, sorry, I'm out. Like, that's just, sorry, I don't have enough for everybody. That's not going to happen. And so in that vein, another simple question is, how can you show love to others? I think that's a really simple question that has a lot of simple and complicated answers, right? Everybody is different to love. Everybody shows love differently. Everybody receives love differently. But it can be as simple as smiling at someone on the street. It can be as simple as asking a cashier how their day is going, or a waitress, or a coworker. a fellow mother, your family, your best friend, right? It is so easy and it takes so little time to show the people that we love them. And it makes people's day. I remember going to a gas station once, and I went inside and I bought some snacks or something. And at the end of the transaction, of course, the cashier goes, "Hey, thank you, have a nice day." And I was like, "Hey, you too." And she looked surprised that I had said anything. And I'm not saying that nobody else had ever said, "Have a good day" to her, right? It might have just been like she was having a really crappy day and nobody had said anything to her. But it broke my heart a little bit to think that, like, that surprised her. That little bit of kindness shocked her so much. It really is so easy to show those around us that we love them. And I really loved this talk and that reminder that God's love is never far away, and that we can also be a vessel of God's love for others. That he needs us to be the vessel of his love, because he is not here physically. We need to be his hands on the earth, showing other people that they are loved. Especially in the world that we live in so many times of fear and discontent and it's just a wild, wild world, isn't it? And it can be a very cruel one. And so we can be that good in the world, even if it just feels so small. We are making a difference, a tiny one, but we are making a difference. So that is all I've got for you guys today. Thank you so much for listening. I'm grateful for it, and I will see you all next time.